Hey friends, tonight we're diving into something ancient, harsh, and oddly relatable. Picture a world of chamber pots, crammed apartment blocks, and endless hard work. This isn't the polished Rome you've seen in movies or museums. No emperors showing off, no glamorous gladiators, just the daily struggle of ordinary people history barely bothered to remember. Before we slip into the hidden side of the Roman Empire, do me a quick favor. Hit the like button and subscribe if you're into this kind of slow, gritty storytelling. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is where you are. It's always fun to see how far this little late night experiment reaches. Okay, lights down low, maybe turn on a fan or pull the covers up, because you're about to wake up in ancient Rome. And honestly, the odds of you making it through the day aren't looking too good. Congratulations, you've just opened your eyes in the eternal city, but you're not reclining in a palace or lounging in some marble courtyard with servants feeding you grapes. Nope, you've landed where most Romans actually lived. The plumbing is more of a rumor than a reality. The walls feel like they might collapse if someone sneezes too hard, and the neighbor upstairs stomps around like a soldier practicing drills. Welcome to the Insula, Rome's version of an apartment complex. Sounds fancy, right? Maybe a courtyard, some sunshine. Wrong. The word insula literally means island, and that's your first clue you're stranded here. If you're lucky, you're on the 4th floor. Higher than that, you're basically clinging to the rafters of a tinderbox. These buildings are thrown together with brick, wood, and sheer optimism. They lean on each other like drunk friends, sway in the wind, and are about as sturdy as a stale loaf of bread, and don't even think about cooking breakfast. Open flames are banned because one slip with a fire, and the entire block could go up in smoke faster than a festival bonfire. Your room, if we're being generous, is about the size of a walk-in closet today. There's a cot, though calling it that is a kindness, ropes and straw, with a blanket so worn down it smells like every stranger who ever used it before you. The walls are damp and stained, and close enough that if you lie sideways, you can touch both at once. Windows? Forget it. The only light seeps in from a crack under the door and from a hole some tenant punched in the ceiling years ago with a broom handle. Privacy doesn't exist here. You're sharing this tight little box with 2 others, and one of them is coughing so theatrically you half wonder if you're trapped in some bad Roman play. Spoiler alert, it's not drama. It's probably tuberculosis. Outside, the city is already alive. Forget birds singing. Instead, you hear the rattle of wooden carts and vendors shouting about olives, fish, and something unrecognizable. A donkey brays like it's being murdered. Children wail as though they actually are. And 2 floors below, someone's already fighting about taxes. You stretch, big mistake. Your back pops like a brittle scroll left out in the desert sun, and instantly you regret trying to move like someone whose spine isn't permanently bent from years of hard labor and a diet that's 80% beans and 20% disappointment. You're about 27, which, in this neighborhood, practically makes you one of the elders. Most people don't see 40. Between accidents, infections, and the fumes that drift out of the latrine pit every summer, survival past your 30s is basically a winning the lottery. You drag yourself out of bed, barefoot of course. Shoes cost money, and if you had money, you wouldn't be here. The floor greets you with its usual chill and sticky surprise. Is that spilled wine, urine, olive oil? Honestly, probably all 3. You tiptoe around your roommate, still snoring on the floor, And do your best not to bump the communal chamber pot. Spoiler, it's full. It's always full. Nature calls. Time to pick your poison. Option 1, the chamber pot, which someone will eventually empty. And by empty, I mean hurled out the window with zero ceremony. There's a proper way to do it. You're supposed to yell cave, Latin for watch out, before launching it into the street, but let's be real, almost nobody bothers. So the streets reek. Urine, feces, rotting food, and broken dreams mix into a bouquet that would make your eyes water, gutters overflow, waste runs freely, and if you're lucky, the rain hasn't already washed it back toward your doorway. Hygiene? Cute idea. There are no showers, no soap, no toothpaste. If you're feeling ambitious, you might splash your face in a public fountain, right alongside a dozen other people and maybe a stray dog licking an open wound. For your teeth, you've got options that aren't much better. A twig to scrape the grime. Maybe some ash rubbed across them if you're feeling fancy. Your breath. Imagine fermented lentils with a side of existential dread. Still, you throw on your one and only tunic. It's rough wool or linen, stained in ways you've long since given up trying to identify. It carries the permanent scent of mildew and humanity. No deodorant, no underwear. You cinch it shut with a rope and pray it doesn't slip. If it does, congratulations, you've just invented public indecency. Not that anyone would notice. Modesty in Rome is more of an upper-class hobby than a rule. Stepping outside feels like walking straight into a sensory battlefield. The street is alive, and not in the pleasant way. Vendors bark for attention, beggars plead, oxen relieve themselves mid-step. Clouds of flies buzz so thick around the fish stalls you can barely see. Somewhere nearby, a rooster is either being slaughtered or just screaming its little bird heart out. Smoke, sweat, and mystery stews combine into one overpowering smell of disappointment. Your neighbor's child sprints past, barefoot, sticky with something red. Is it jam, blood, both? You decide not to investigate. Finally, you join the line at the communal bakery, one of the few small luxuries you and your neighbors get to share. You hand over your government-issued grain ration, a sack of coarse barley flour wrapped in cloth. The baker dumps it in with everyone else's, and hours later, you'll get back a hard blackened loaf, barely edible, more ash than bread, but hey, it's warm, it's filling, and it's technically yours, assuming no one steals it first. Breakfast. So, let's pretend it's a good day. Breakfast isn't exactly a feast, but you've managed to get a bowl of pulse, a thick porridge made from boiled grains. That's the staple meal for most poor Romans. Grain, water, maybe a few chickpeas if fortune smiles on you. On a really lucky morning, you'll find a drizzle of olive oil on top. On a not-so-lucky morning, that drizzle might be courtesy of a rat, and you probably won't realize it until much later. Meat? That's for the wealthy. Milk? Spoils too quickly. Cheese and eggs? Only if you've got a chicken tucked away under the stairs and can grab them before someone else does. For protein, most folks rely on beans, lentils, and sheer wishful thinking. Craving fruit? It better be in season and fresh. Otherwise, you're gnawing on the husk of a shriveled fig and pretending it's something better. Next stop, the latrina, the public restroom. Think less private stall and more social gathering spot nobody wants to be at. Picture a stone bench with a series of holes. No walls, no partitions. A dozen people, all sitting shoulder to shoulder, doing their business. And toilet paper, not even close. The Romans used a shared sponge, on a stick dipped in vinegar. You rinse, wipe, rinse again, and pass it along. It's as awkward as it sounds. Let's just say eye contact is strongly avoided, and after all that, it's still only mid-morning. You haven't even started work yet. But before heading off to whatever physically punishing job awaits, you pause to take in your surroundings. The street is alive, filthy, chaotic, dangerous, but undeniably alive. Kids shriek and chase each other through the alleys. A street performer juggles knives with more enthusiasm than actual skill. A merchant shouts about the miracle powers of fermented fish sauce. The entire city feels like it's breathing, wheezing, and groaning all at once. Your landlord? Never seen him. Repairs? Don't hold your breath. If your building collapses, no one calls it a disaster. They call it Tuesday. Fires break out constantly, floods too. Sudden unexplained death is basically part of the city soundtrack. You're not seen as a person with rights or dreams. You're just another body filling space. Your worth measured in how quietly you endure it all. Because this isn't the Rome of golden statues and marble forums. It's not the heroic Rome of Hollywood epics or glowing historians' tales. This is the Rome of soot-stained walls, overcrowded apartments, overflowing chamber pots, and endless noise. You're not Cicero. You're not Caesar. You're not even close. You're just another exhausted soul living on the fourth floor, hoping the third doesn't go up in flames again. Still, small victories count. You've made it through your first Roman night without being robbed, smoked out, or flattened by your drunk neighbor rolling onto your mat. That's something. But the gods aren't letting you off easy. Your reward? Waking up to the sharp, relentless chorus of yelling. It's not an alarm clock. Rome doesn't have those. It's your neighbor screaming at his wife, the fish vendor shouting below your window, or the sound of a chamber pot exploding onto the cobblestones after someone dumped last night's leftovers, wine, waste, and who knows what else. Morning in Rome doesn't begin with birdsong. It begins with complaints, sewage, and regret. You open your eyes to a ceiling so low you could smack it just by sitting up. You're lying on a straw mat crammed beside your younger sibling, your cousin, or maybe even a stranger who slipped your landlord a few coins for the privilege of crashing on the floor. The air is thick with the smell of garlic, sweat, and mildew. Welcome to another day in ancient Rome. For a moment, you wonder if you've died and woken up in Hades. But no, you're still alive, unfortunately. What you call home is a Roman insula, basically an apartment block made of wood, wishful thinking, and highly flammable lies. You're stuck on the third floor, which is marginally safer than the fifth. The higher you go, the cheaper the rent, and the higher the chance you'll be buried under rubble when the whole building eventually gives up on life. The wealthy live below, in sturdier homes with luxuries like proper plumbing. Up here, you get rats, leaky walls, and that constant creaking sound reminding you the place is held together by mold and prayer. You swing your legs off the mat and instantly regret it. The floor is wet. It's always wet. Water, spilled wine, maybe blood. Who can tell? Doesn't matter. The fact remains. Your sandals were stolen last week, so you've been walking barefoot through this mystery soup ever since. You tiptoe around the sticky patch in the corner and stand, stretching your aching back like a cat that's been kicked down a flight of stairs. Time to wash up, or at least pretend. There's no basin, no sink, no soap. Instead, you wipe your face with a damp cloth that may or may not have doubled as your landlord's armpit rag. In Rome, the closest thing to skincare involves smearing oil on your body and scraping it off with a curved tool called a striggle. Sounds fancy until you realize it's basically exfoliation by pain. Imagine buttering yourself like a piece of bread, then peeling it off again. If you're lucky enough to live near a public bathhouse and happen to have a few coins to spare, you might actually get clean later. But right now, hygiene is a luxury you don't have. You settle for splashing your face with whatever water you find in a communal jar and call it refreshed. Now comes breakfast, so brace yourself. The Roman version of a power meal is almost nothing. The morning bite is called ientaculum, which roughly translates to don't expect much. Usually it's just a chunk of yesterday's bread, now as hard as a brick, lovingly stored overnight in a clay pot that doubles as a mouse buffet. To make it edible, you soak it in watered-down wine, a beverage that tastes like vinegar with trust issues. If fortune favors you, maybe you add a few olives, or better yet, a smear of garum. That's Rome's favorite condiment. A fermented fish sauce that smells like rotting docks and regret. They put it on everything: meat, vegetables, even despair. Think of it as ketchup, if ketchup were made from decaying mackerel. There's no coffee, no eggs, no smoothie with collagen powder. Your breakfast has exactly one job: stop you from dropping dead before noon. It barely manages. You chew in silence while the building around you erupts in noise. Neighbors shouting about taxes, someone arguing over grain rations, and of course, the guy on the second floor who insists on sacrificing pigeons in the hallway. Best not to ask. In Roman tenement life, the less you know, the longer you live. Once you've gnawed your way through your slice of stale disappointment and washed it down with wine-flavored sadness, it's time to get dressed for the day. Don't get too excited about your wardrobe. You own exactly 2 pieces of clothing, a rough wool tunic and a threadbare cloak that's more whole than fabric. The tunic scratches like sandpaper. The cloak reeks of mildew and despair. Both have been patched, sodded so many times, they're basically stitched together with prayers and wishful thinking. Underwear? That's a good joke. Instead, you tie a rope around your waist to keep everything vaguely in place and hope it doesn't all slide off in public. Your left shoulder is always peeking out anyway, since the fabric refuses to stay put. The wealthy strut around in togas, those big, draped symbols of status. You wouldn't dare. Togas are for citizens, the elite. You're a plebeian. If you're an immigrant, you're not even that. You're a nobody. If you walk outside in a toga, you're either delusional or auditioning to get arrested for impersonating someone important. Step outside, and you're immediately smacked in the face by the full sensory assault of a Roman street. The noise is instant and endless, vendors shouting about goods, musicians making questionable noises with instruments nobody asked to hear, philosophers arguing loudly in the middle of the road, and somehow someone is always yelling about cucumbers. It's chaos. Smelly, crowded, barely contained chaos. The streets are paved with stone, but slick with everything imaginable. Donkey droppings, human waste, and mysterious sludge no one dares identify. Rome does have sewers, but they mostly serve the wealthy neighborhoods. Your street, it's self-cleaning. Meaning, if you're lucky, a rainstorm washes the filth downhill into someone else's part of town. Efficient, in its own tragic way. You pick your steps carefully, weaving between puddles, carts, and people. A cart pulled by donkeys barrels past, its driver shouting, like pedestrians, are a personal insult. Sidewalks don't exist. Traffic laws don't exist. There's only instinct, quick feet, and the faint hope that the gods are paying attention. Along the way, you pass temples where citizens line up to leave offerings, flowers, coins, chickens, or just whispered prayers. You don't have anything to give, so you settle for an awkward nod in Jupiter's direction and keep walking. Odds are he wasn't listening anyway. And now, work. If you're heading to a job, congratulations. That means you didn't starve yesterday. But don't mistake it for anything noble. Work in Rome isn't fulfilling. It isn't meaningful. It's just survival in a tunic. Maybe you're a laborer, hauling bricks or mixing mortar for one of the emperor's endless building projects. Maybe you're a porter, carrying goods up and down creaking staircases that could collapse at any moment. Maybe you sell fish, clean streets, spin pottery, or worst of all, tend to a public latrine, sweeping human filth off stone floors in exchange for a few bronze coins and a nose full of nightmares. The hours are brutal, the pay is pitiful, and your boss reserves the right to beat you for entertainment. If you're a slave, you don't even get coins, you just work. If you complain, you're whipped. If you collapse, you're replaced. If you die, congratulations. Your blanket goes to the next unlucky soul. By midday, the sun is merciless. Rome's climate is hot, sticky, and entirely indifferent to your suffering. There's no shade, no cool breeze, no relief. Unless you hug the side of a building like a sweaty ghost, you're baking alive under the Mediterranean sun. Your tunic clings to your sweat-soaked skin. If you're lucky enough to still have sandals, they slap against the stone roads with every tired step. If not, your bare feet are slowly merging with the pavement itself, each step grinding calluses into the unforgiving ground. Lunchtime, or what passes for it. The Romans call it panis meridianus, midday bread. For you, it usually means more of the same. Stale bread, maybe a scrap of cheese, maybe a wrinkled fig if fortune's feeling generous. If your boss had a good night of gambling, perhaps a boiled egg shows up. You sit on a cracked step, chewing slowly, watching the wealthy glide by in litters, carried by slaves, paraded like living furniture. You keep eating, pretending not to notice the grit between your teeth and trying to ignore the very real possibility that you just swallowed rodent hair. As the sun climbs, the smells grow stronger. The air hangs heavy with sweat, rotting garbage, and that ever-present tang of garum. You pass a bakery, inhaling deeply. The scent of fresh bread almost convinces you life might be tolerable, almost. Then reality slams back. Bread is taxed. Your landlord raised rent again. Your water jar cracked last night. And your cousin still hasn't shaken off whatever plague is fashionable this season. You keep walking. You keep enduring. Because in Rome, that's the job. Survive. At last, after endless hours of hauling, sweating, and trying not to collapse in public, you trudge home. The stairs up to your insula groan under your weight. They're splintered, uneven, and more dangerous than half the gladiators in the Colosseum. One wrong step, and you'll join the unlucky tenants from the 5th floor who didn't make it last week. Somehow, you reach your door. Inside, it's dark, cramped, and filled with a smell suspiciously like boiling cabbage, which is strange because you don't own any cabbage. Someone is already asleep in your corner. You don't ask who they are. In Roman apartments, mystery roommates are part of the package. You just lie down beside them and close your eyes, praying your dreams don't involve chamber pots. And with that, your Roman day comes to a pitiful end. Was it glorious? Not even close. Dignified? Absolutely not. But you made it. And in ancient Rome, that's about the highest bar anyone clears. Tomorrow, you'll do it again. You've survived your first Roman night in the insula, barely. Sleep comes in broken waves, interrupted by the creak of floorboards overhead, your neighbors arguing, wagons clattering down the street, and the constant itching on your leg you refuse to identify. Now you wake hungry. Not the kind of hunger that makes you plan brunch or reach for a protein shake. This is raw, gnawing, heavy hunger, the kind that reminds you food is fuel, not pleasure. Breakfast, at least what Romans called it, isn't the grand event we think of today. They called it antaculum, a small morning meal, usually just a nibble to get through the day. For the wealthy, it might be bread dipped in wine, a slice of cheese, a few olives, maybe even some fruit. But you're not wealthy. You're a plebeian, one of thousands, jammed into Rome's underbelly, scraping out a life beneath the city's marble grandeur. For people like you, iantaculum is nothing more than a token gesture to keep the hunger pangs quiet. Maybe you get a crust of coarse bread, rough and uneven, left over from yesterday. Or more likely, the day before that. It's made from barley or spelt, the grains the rich avoid, but the poor depend on. Dry, heavy, unappetizing. You chew slowly, knowing it's not really breakfast. It's survival in its barest form. The bread in your hand is dense, dark, and chews like a chunk carved straight off a wall. Forget butter, jam, or honey. Those belong to people with money and influence. For you, breakfast luxuries don't exist. If fortune's decided to throw you a bone today, you might have a bowl of pulse. Pulse is the staple of Rome's poor, a thick porridge made from grains like farro, emmer, or barley. You boil it with water, maybe drizzle a drop of oil if you've got some, or toss in the faintest sprinkle of herbs. If luck and generosity collide, it's not delicious. It's not even comforting. It's heavy, bland, and clings to your stomach like a stone anchor. On the worst days, the water you use comes from a barrel left out in the rain or scooped from the river, slightly green, a little earthy, carrying the flavor of desperation. You eat it quickly, because if you take your time, your brain might start registering that it tastes like hot, wet nothing. Still, it's fuel. That's all it needs to be. Sometimes, if you're fortunate, there's pasca to drink, a sour mix of vinegar and water, the go-to beverage of soldiers and peasants alike. It's sharp, acidic, and far from pleasant, but safer than drinking straight from the fountains. The vinegar masks the taste of questionable water and kills enough germs to keep you from collapsing in the street. So, you sip, wince, and remind yourself it's better than dysentery. Those fountains, after all, are fed by Rome's mighty aqueducts, engineering marvels that bring fresh mountain water across miles of stone. Impressive, sure, but by the time that water snakes its way into your district, its freshness is questionable. Lead pipes leak, distribution tanks, castella clog, and maintenance crews rarely set foot in your neighborhood unless bribed. If someone upstream dumps garbage, blood, or worse into the flow, you'll only discover it when it's far too late. Hunger never really leaves you. Even when you eat, it just quiets down to a dull roar in the background. Food costs too much, and most of what little sake coin you scrape together disappears into rent, taxes, or offerings to the local patron who controls your fate. You learn to ration carefully, chewing slowly, savoring each mouthful, as though it's a rare delicacy, even when it isn't. Variety? That's a fantasy. You eat whatever's available, and more often than not, that means the exact same meal day after day. Meat is nearly absent from your diet. Maybe once in a long while, you'll gnaw on a scrap of salted fish, usually tiny sardines or garum-soaked leftovers, so pungent they double as pest control. Actual cuts of meat, those belong to the wealthy, the temples, or the legions, and if a sliver ever reaches your table, it's usually offal, organ bits, gristle, or bones no one else wants. You don't waste a single piece. As for fruits and vegetables, they arrive inconsistently, depending on the market stalls and the season. You might stumble upon wilted leeks, onions, or turnips toward the end of the day when vendors are desperate to unload what no one else would buy. Apples and figs show up in abundance on occasion, but your purse rarely matches the abundance. More often, you take home the rejects, half-rotten figs, split dates, bruised apples, bundles of greens already curling at the edges, all sold cheaply, all wrapped in yesterday's gossip, grease, and dirt. Edible? Technically, yes. Hopefully. And when hunger really starts clawing at you, the streets provide their own solutions. Rome thrives on street food, especially for people like you who don't have kitchens inside their insular apartments. Fire laws and cramped wooden rooms make private cooking too dangerous. So the popinais, tiny taverns, and hot food stalls line the alleys of working-class districts. For a handful of copper coins, you might get a steaming bowl of lentils flavored with scraps of bone, or drippings salvaged from yesterday's stew. Maybe a small stick of meat, salted into oblivion and tough enough to question its origins. If your sweet tooth begs, you can grab a honey cake, baked hard, from stale flour, faintly sweet, but so dry you need to soak it before your teeth give up. These shops are chaotic. They reek of hot oil, burnt bread, and sweat. The noise is constant. Men arguing, laughter breaking out, cups slamming on wooden counters. Their customers are laborers like you, freedmen trying to make their way, veterans looking for work, and criminals who always seem to find trouble. They're risky places. Fights spark easily, purses vanish, tempers flare, but if you want something warm in your stomach, you don't have much choice. You keep going back, because a hot meal is worth the gamble. The truth is, most Romans didn't cook their own food. Lower-class apartments rarely had private kitchens, and the constant threat of fire kept open flames strictly controlled. That left you relying on bakers, street vendors, and the shifting prices of grain and oil. Grain, of course, is the heart of Rome's diet. The empire knows this, which is why the state created the Annonia, the grain dole. Eligible Roman citizens could collect a monthly ration, just enough to stretch into bread or poles for a few weeks. It wasn't generous, but it kept the poor alive. Without it, half the city would starve. But the catch, not everyone qualifies. You must be a registered Roman male. If you're a woman, a foreigner, or enslaved, the Annonia passes you by. You survive however you can, through markets, patrons, or scraps. Your meals are rarely fresh. Bread hardens quickly, stew congeals, porridge clings stubbornly to the bottom of the pot long after it should have been washed away. Spoilage is constant, flies even more so. You don't throw food out. You carve away to mold, scrape the green edges, and eat what's left. Every bite is slow, cautious, and sometimes forced. And yet, Rome itself never starves. The granaries stay stocked. Imports flow steadily. Ships from Egypt, Sicily, and North Africa arrive daily, carrying grain, oil, and wine to feed the capital. The empire pours its bounty into the city like a mother spooning food into a demanding child. The problem is, you don't always get your share. If you're enslaved or bound as a servant, Your meals depend entirely on your master's mood. Maybe you'll get bread, stew, or table scraps. Or maybe you'll be forgotten until nightfall. If you're a day laborer, your work dictates when and if you eat. You dig trenches, haul stones, carry water, and if you're lucky, someone lets you pause mid-morning to chew a dried fig or gulp from a shared jug of sour wine. And then there are feast days. So that was a day in the life of an ordinary Roman, not the emperors, not the senators, not the generals whose names echo through history, but the real Rome, the crowded, noisy, smelly Rome, where survival itself was an achievement. No marble palaces, no golden wreaths, no epic speeches, just stale bread, boiling streets, collapsing apartments, and the endless will to push through one more day. Because in the end, that's what kept the empire alive. Millions of forgotten lives quietly enduring. So next time you picture Rome, don't just think of Caesar or gladiators in the Colosseum. Think of the plebs, the workers, the slaves, the people who woke up every morning, prayed their ceiling wouldn't fall on them, and somehow kept the city breathing. Congratulations, you've survived your first Roman day. Now the question is, would you make it through a second?